Are you looking for a quality true crime podcast? Check out Already Gone.
I'm Nina Instead, host of the Already Gone podcast. Each week, I share stories of the missing, the mysterious, the murdered, and the lost. Stories that I share tend to focus on Michigan or the Great Lakes region, and they're stories you may not have heard before. I hope you'll join us.
After listening to Gone at 21, check out Already Gone. Welcome to the last scheduled episode of the Gone at 21 podcast. We are going to start off today's episode with the 2016-2017 Katie Harris messages, Facebook messages. Let's begin with Katelyn's admirer. I will separate my comments with Katie's by saying me for my text and Katie for her comments. Let's begin. Me. Do you know the name Christopher? Katie. That name sounds familiar to me, but I'm not sure who it is. I remember her talking about someone she went to school with that really liked her and seemed to bother her, but I don't remember his name. Me. I sent a picture of Christopher with a caption. That's him. Butler Tech. Me. He is a registered sex offender. Katie. Yes, I do remember him. I didn't know him very well. That made me remember a couple weeks before she went missing, she told me that he asked her out on a date and was upset when she said no. She was engaged. And he tried to pursue her. Me. Thank you. Was she afraid of him? How upset was he? Katie. She was uneasy about it definitely and said she thought he took it pretty hard because he said he loved her. I forgot about this. I re-engaged Katie a while later about that message conversation just to make sure I got it right and no wires were crossed. Me. Katie, do you know what kind of vehicle Christopher drove? Also, can you remember exact wording Katelyn used while talking about Christopher? Katie, no, I don't know. She just said some dude in her class had a thing for her and asked her out, and she wouldn't tell me his name. And she would tell him no, and that he was creepy. Me, but you recognize Christopher's pic as that person who was asking her out, right? Katie, I recognize him as Christopher. I said I remember it was a boy in her class, but I don't know his name. You said that was his name. And I said I remember his face as being Christopher. So Katie remembers Christopher's name and face, but can't say for sure it was him who had a thing for Katelyn. I got mixed up in our messaging. This is why I like to revisit conversations and verify that the info I received was accurate. Let's look at the word Katelyn used with Katie in reference to Christopher. Creepy. John also used that word several times when talking about Christopher. Now, this next clip I'm about to play you is actually 3 clips in a row, and I cut the name John was using for Christopher because he refers to him by another name. In the last clip, you will hear John say, I knew that creepy to her, I knew creepy to her. Just add Christopher in that sentence.
Like, she would say things like saying really creepy stuff to me, or he'd say creepy stuff to me on the bus, but I trusted Katelyn.
Yeah.
All the evidence against existed on Facebook, existed in all the creepy text messages he sent to many different people, and even people I met after the fact.
That you sent to Katelyn?
Yeah, of course not. And I knew that creepy to her. I knew creepy to her when she went to school with him. I knew continued to talk to her after they were out of school. I didn't know to the extent of what he was doing.
Now, just about all of Katelyn's friends refer to Christopher as creepy. Christopher was in Katelyn's class. So I think Katelyn referred to Christopher as creepy to a lot of her friends that she spoke to about him. That is the word Katie uses, and said he was in her class. I have come to the conclusion that that creepy guy Katelyn spoke to Katie about was Christopher. Also, you heard John say, I knew Christopher continued to talk to her even after they were out of school. Before we leave this conversation about Christopher, let's listen to Karen Winkler's opinion of him.
We haven't talked a lot about it. But again, and I told you this on the phone before, is that was a conversation that I would have with Becky, and I would bring it up and I would say, Becky, I'm telling you, I believe it's someone like that. You're telling me it's not, but what I believe with my whole heart is it's someone who wanted her, and she said, no, I'm with John. I just have always believed that.
I can say Karen has a good point here. Christopher is a major concern to me, and I would hope that law enforcement looks further into him and his alibi, if he has one. I would hope that they do a thorough investigation with all police investigative techniques available to them. Katie Harris arrives at Katelyn's townhouse. Me. Did John Carter walk through before you and John Palmerton got there? Also, did you all start calling people before the police got there? Katie. No. I think he waited for us to get there. John Carter called Katelyn's work to see if she was there. They said she didn't show up for work. He called me and John Palmerton. Told us he hadn't talked to Katelyn, which was out of the ordinary. He was working. He went to her condo on break or delivery. He was a pizza driver back then. He called me and John and asked if we've talked to her and asked us to come over. He was worried. John Carter had a spare key and went into her house to see if she was there. John Carter called her father, I believe. I don't remember if I called anyone or not. Maybe I did, to see if anyone has heard from her. I'm actually saying John Carter and John Palmerton because she uses John C. and John P., and I think that could get a little bit confusing. So I'm going to call them by their name. Katie did call Mary, per the phone records. Me. Did you see John Carter put the key in the door and open it? Where was he when you arrived? Did he say he had been in the house yet? Did he seem like he was seeing it for the first time after you entered with him? Katie. Yeah. I recall him mentioning he wasn't supposed to have a key, that her dad would be upset. He was in the parking lot when we arrived. It did seem like he was seeing it for the first time. Katie. If he had already been in, I don't know why he would have me and John come over and look again. Katie. Do you think John Carter had something to do with it? Me. I didn't answer that at the time. Instead, I asked her if she believed that. Katie. I have no reason to believe he did. But, to be honest with you, I'm leaving all possibilities open because I have no idea what happened. Katie goes on. Well, to think about it now, years later, it does seem odd to me that he would call me and John Palmerton to ask us to come over. Why did we need to be there for him to check the house? Why did he wait for us? If I was concerned about someone, I would just go into their house to see if they were there. I wouldn't call my friends and wait until they got there to go check. That seems pointless to me. Katie. It also seems wrong to me that he had a new girlfriend just a few months later. I mean, Katelyn and John were engaged. He said his therapist suggested he got with someone else. But that seems weird. I couldn't be able to do that just a few months into them missing. Katie, all these things are really starting to not make sense to me. And there was no signs of a struggle or anything in her house. I think someone we all know did this. This is unsettling to me. When it happened, I dismissed all my friends. Of course, because why would any one of them want to hurt Katelyn? But now, several years later, I don't talk to any of them anymore or see them. I don't even live in Ohio anymore. These things you remind me of today are very off to me. Katie was referring to a comment that Karen Winkler made in the media about Katelyn's bed appearing to be slept in, but Katelyn's purse and clothing were on the bed where she would have been sleeping. I brought this point up to Katie. Katie said things were clean downstairs, even vacuum lines in the carpet. Papers that were normally scattered were neatly stacked. I asked Katie the same question I asked earlier. Did John say he had not been in the house? Or did he say anything to make you think he already went in? He claims he went in and searched the house, then called you and John Palmerton. Katie, no, he said he hadn't gone in there. He waited for us to get there, then unlocked the door. Me, from what you're telling me, I'm thinking all calls were made in the parking lot until you and John Palmerton got there. There were several calls before the one to you and John Palmerton. I have left some comments out about claims or questions about other people that I can't substantiate that Katie made. Katie, he also told me he left because she was going to bed and went to the fire. I was invited but didn't go. I had to work. I know for a fact Murphy was in the bathroom. I know John Carter was very distraught when me and John Palmerton showed up to her house. He was crying. Murphy was locked in the bathroom. I don't know who Brad is, but I know they were hanging out that night. Katie then re-explains this process to me in detail. It is scattered with moments in time, and she jumps in and out from the time Katelyn was found and just missing. So please bear with this part of the messages. She does a good job explaining what she is talking about, though. So, you might have later time and then earlier time and then a later time again. So just please bear with that. Katie, I got off work around 6 a.m. Went home, went to bed, woke up, went to John Palmerton's mother's house, and John Carter called us. He was freaking out. He hasn't heard from Katelyn, and could we come over? We walk over. He said he was on a break or delivery. He stopped by to check to see if she was home. We went in the back door. It was locked. He unlocked it. Made mention he wasn't supposed to have a key and her father would be mad. We went into her house. We found Murphy in the bathroom downstairs. There was a pencil holder knocked over in her room, Katelyn's room, and a picture frame face down in the living room. We went outside, took Murphy out, called the police. John Carter was crying and shaking, saying she was gone. I can't recall who he called first, Dave or the police. Her dad showed up. I started calling people to see if anyone had heard from her or seen her. I remember John's leg was broken at the time. Days after, he didn't talk about it much. We figured he was upset. I made posters for her. When the search teams came, he never showed up to any of the searches. As far as that statement goes, I know he was at least at the first search because the media was interviewing him there. Back to Katie's account. I figured it was because his leg was hurt. I remember when she was found. I went to Ohio shortly after and went to a party. John Carter walked up to me, blank stare on his face, and said, "You know they found Katelyn's remains." And I said, "Yes, I know," and gave him a hug. He seemed unaffected by it. Matt never showed any real signs of being upset the entire time either. John Carter started dating Kayla. All of us were taken back by it because Katelyn was just still missing. He said he went to therapy all the time, and he had to accept she was gone. That's what the therapist told him, which I find weird. and he had to move on. I remember John Carter mentioning it would be hard for him to have sex with another woman at first. Why would his thoughts be there just a few months into her disappearance? I'm just remembering all this. I don't know if any of it helps. I want my friend's death resolved, and the terrible person who would hurt her to be gone forever. This is all upsetting to me. Why would John lie so much if he didn't have any guilt? And he told me he sent a good morning text, and the last thing she sent was a picture of herself before going to bed. Me, I asked Katie if the dog went to the bathroom when she took him outside. Remember, John Carter said he took the dog out, then called Katie and John Palmerton. Katie's response? Yes. And there was poop in the bathroom, I believe. It was like he had been locked in there all night. Now, I also want to point out John Palmerton made it seem like he and Katie drove over, and Katie said they walked over. When people change their stories, I want to know why. I messaged Katie this. Hey Katie, I just listened to the conversation we had in June of last year. It was the first time we spoke. You mentioned that John Carter said he had already went in the house before you and John Palmerton got there, and you were pretty sure about that. Yesterday, you text me that John Carter didn't go in until you and John Palmerton got there. What do you make of that? Me, I'm just trying to clear the discrepancies up. That's all. Katie, I guess I must have got confused. I remember very clearly John unlocked the house and Murphy was in the bathroom, and he walked through with us. I know this for 1,000%. I'm very sorry for the confusion. It was a long time ago, and I'm trying to remember small details. Now, me confirming. Okay, so are you remembering he did or didn't go into the house before you and John Palmerton got there? Katie, I don't see why the door would be locked, why Murphy would be locked up, and why he walked us through if he had already been in. Fast forward to June 2017. Me, Katie, didn't you say there was poop in the bathroom? Katie, yes. Me, and Murphy went to the bathroom fast and a lot when you took him outside? Katie, yeah. Me, okay, one last question and I will leave you alone. Did John say he had not been in the townhouse yet? And that pic that was turned over was of her? Meaning Katelyn? Katie, yes he did, and yes it was. Me, okay, so just one more, LOL. What % are you sure John Carter said he had not been in the house yet? I promise, no more questions tonight. Katie, I'm 95% sure. Me, thanks. Katie, I'm almost positive. It was a long time ago. Now, these questions arise as I think about Katie's statements. First, the way Katie saw things. Could it have been a perception that wasn't accurate? But if John went back out to the parking lot knowing Matt was on his way and Katie and John Palmerton were right up the street, would he lock the door? Second, did John walk back out to the parking lot and lock the door to make it seem he was entering for the first time? Did he have a plan that was scrapped? Third, was Katie there when Katelyn died and changed her story to make John look guilty? I think the chances are slim that Katie was there when Katelyn died. She had an alibi. She was at work. I believe she would have told the truth up front, or at least over the years she would have told the truth. I don't think Katie would have treated her good friend like that or betrayed Katelyn's memory this way. Fourth, the first time I spoke to Katie, she was traveling. When she gave me this statement, she was stationary in one place and was working. She was more stable and probably less stressed. When people are less stressed, their thoughts are clearer, which allows them to remember small details better. I know when I'm less stressed, my memory is clearer and more accurate. If Katie's second account was right, John was seen unlocking the door. 3 people had keys: Katelyn, John, and David Markham. Katelyn was gone and her keys were inside the house. David had his key, and by the way, Dave passed a polygraph, and his time was accounted for Saturday and Sunday. The next set of keys were with John. He mentioned to Katie and John Palmerton, if her dad knew I had this key, he would be mad. Well, no signs of forced entry. Door was locked, according to Katie in her second statement. John was unlocking the door with the key he wasn't supposed to have. How did someone else lock the deadbolt back? Let me explain. If Katie's later statement is correct, someone with the ability to lock the door would have committed this crime. They took Katelyn, they locked the door, her keys were inside. Dave has a complete alibi from a reliable source and passed the polygraph. Who does that leave? Now, this is only if Katie's second story is correct. And at this point, it can't be substantiated by anybody other than Katie. This information was passed to law enforcement, so let's see if they re-interviewed Katie. Me, Katie, did law enforcement contact you about your statement you messaged me yet? If not, let me know if they do. Thanks again. This was Katie's response as of 2 days ago. Katie, nope. That speaks volumes to me. Let me dig a little deeper into Katie's second statement. When I spoke to her the first time, in the summer of 2015, she had just left Ohio after a visit. She was on the road when I got there and spoke to her on the phone. In this 2016 statement, she has not seen this group of people for a year and 4 months. The statement that was made to confirm in 2017 is 2 years removed. In 2011, Katie lived in the Fairfield, Ohio area and dated one of John Carter's best friends. So Katie was a part of John and Katelyn's inner circle. Today, she is hundreds, if not thousands of miles away and has no ties to that group of friends anymore. I would say she feels more comfortable and more free to speak the truth because the fear has not only passed with time, but also with distance. Witnesses need to be re-interviewed as the years go by. That doesn't seem to be happening in this case. One last thing in reference to Katie's statement. Do you remember when she said John told her the reason he left was because Katelyn was going to bed? But then he told me something else and kind of got a little upset when I called him out on it because of what he told Nancy Grace. And he said that he wasn't going to say publicly to anybody that he and Katelyn were in a fight. Well, why is he lying to his inner circle? Why didn't he just tell Katie he got bored or that him and Katelyn were in an argument about something? He lied to his friends as well as the police and the public. Brad Von Bargen was talked about several times in this podcast. I received a message this week from someone who said Brad helped her get heroin a couple times. Brad was delivering drugs to people. He was with John and Katelyn the last night Katelyn was seen alive. The question is, did Brad facilitate the drugs that night? He told me he took marijuana over to Katelyn's house. He also told me John had some as well, but was that all Brad took over to Katelyn's townhome? That, unfortunately, is an unknown. Okay, let's talk deleted texts. I'm just wondering why these were deleted and the drug content with you and your friends, like
I deleted all the messages. Okay. I don't know why any were left behind, but it was a select all and do it.
I deleted all the messages. I don't know why any were left behind, but it was select all and do it. Not quite how it happened. I went from August 13th, 2011 back through most of July, and there were many texts. Those texts were composed and received from 24 different people. In fact, there was a group text about getting sushi, and there was a group text from John to his boss, David, at Papa John's, and that text also went to Katelyn about him getting a speeding ticket. So, who did John delete? Katelyn, Josh Shank, Nate Iden, Katie Harris, John's brother Jared, and Joey Schaefer. John had been in contact with all of these people within 24 hours of Katelyn's disappearance. I believe if John was there when Katelyn died. Let me say that again. I believe if John was there when Katelyn died, it most definitely was not a planned out event. John loved Katelyn and Katelyn loved John. Looking at pictures just days before Katelyn's disappearance, I see a happy couple being goofy and having fun. I can see the love between them in these pictures. They were MMS texts. I looked at them, I saw them, and I can tell you I saw two happy people. If John was there when Katelyn died, it would have been an accident of some kind, or something that happened that moment. I'm not saying John was there, or that he killed Katelyn. What I am saying is evidence shows me Katelyn and John seemed very happy just before her disappearance. The evidence also shows me John lied and admitted it. John's account of events and his explanations for those events don't match the phone and text records. Does this make John a murderer? No. Remember the Nancy Grace comment? He wasn't going to tell Nancy Grace or anybody else, but he was telling me because I was investigating and I'm looking for answers. He told me he was not truthful with Nancy Grace about why he left Katelyn's house. And he admitted it on audio. In my opinion, the circumstantial evidence points in a direction that tells us that John may have more information. Maybe he was informed after the fact by someone who was there, or maybe John just does bad in interviews and really doesn't remember specific details or has any knowledge of what happened to Katelyn. The circumstantial evidence is based off of John's statement versus actual phone and text records. But the statements have to be true for the discrepancies to be valid. Some of John's friends refused to speak to me during this investigation. His buddy Nick. I also was unable to speak to a couple of ex-boyfriends of some of Katelyn's female friends. These guys were known drug dealers. I did go deep into this case and have my professional opinion based on statement versus facts, but I would like to go deeper. Unfortunately, my resources ran out, and with the distance between my home and Ohio, resources are needed to continue digging deeper. I went as far as I could with what I had. I made some great headway, interviewed several witnesses that weren't interviewed by police. Some of those witnesses failed polygraphs. I was able to obtain a vehicle from the second to last person to see Katelyn alive. Unfortunately, not much came out of that, except for more questions about the law enforcement investigation. I was able to establish an accurate timeline, and with that, raise questions about statements made by certain witnesses. But the real mission hasn't been accomplished yet. The Butler County Sheriff's Office has announced a person of interest, but didn't release a name. They did ask for more information, and I'm asking for the same thing. I would imagine after almost 6 years, the people involved, the people who know what happened to Katelyn, would want to get it off their chest. Relieve some of that stress from carrying around this terrible secret. The time is now. It would be a tragedy for David Markham to leave this earth without knowing what happened to his daughter. If you know something, please come forward. Here is Dave with some closing remarks.
Hey, Ryan. I appreciate you asking me to be on the show. I appreciate everything that you've done for Katelyn and for her case and to gain her awareness out there. I appreciate all the listeners and the supporters and everybody who continues to follow and support and seek justice for Katelyn. Besides the obvious pain of losing my daughter, this has been a very frustrating 5 years. Frustrating the fact that somebody is out there waking up every day getting to do what they want to do that day, and my daughter doesn't have that choice. It's frustrating that somebody where other people know what happened to Katelyn and are refusing to come forward. And so I appreciate the awareness that you are sharing. I appreciate the people who are listening and following and spreading the word. I do believe justice will come for Katelyn, and I continue to praise you and support you and thank you for all you've done, Ryan. You've been a great friend and a great supporter for Katelyn. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
You think you catch a glimpse of her, but you're dreaming. In fact, you're senseless. You're at the cemetery screaming. Back off the edge, your tears are streaming. You're unbelieving, now hell is freezing. And what's the reason God took your babe? You shook, but you know He took her to a better fate. To be an angel looking up in heaven gates. But your facial gaze goes someone who breaks. You won't live the same without your counterpart. But God's the artist and He needs His worker. But you not, you miss her. But deep down in your heart, you need to let her go where she belongs, up with the stars. But justice, it's blind and deaf. By that I mean it's senseless when it comes to death. They say the team was on a mission till there's nothing left, but the fiend's still missing what took a breath. Rest in peace, Katelyn Markham. It's been over half a decade, they still wanna play charades, so here I am writing out my tirade. The officers say they don't like how they were portrayed, like they don't care about the offing of this man's offspring. Maybe nobody's pulling anything like a hamstring. They didn't have to dump her in the street like a plaything. The zinger isn't stinging this man like a bee sting. They say go with the flow, but we aren't surfing. Just know that Katelyn's name we are forever preserving, having hope to keep other girl from unearthing, especially if they were like her, undeserving. So let's do it for the dad's sanity and hope her name doesn't go in vanity. Whoever is responsible will not get amnesty. Let's do it all for the humanity.
That tribute to Katelyn was written by my 17-year-old son, Justin Ryan Jr. He wrote it and performed it. I will post a link to that song on the Gone at 21 Facebook page. It's already on the discussion group. Thanks to David Markham and Justin Ryan Jr. for participating in this episode. I have one last thing to share with you before I sign off. Several months ago, I spoke to a couple of John's former co-workers, and they told me about a book that John Carter wrote. He told them it was about a greater being coming down and abducting people, and they vanished without a trace. This book was written before Katelyn disappeared, or at least John told them about the book before Katelyn disappeared. If any of John's friends are listening and have a copy of this book, I would sure like to see it. I would like to extend my gratitude to everybody that has listened to this podcast and participated in the discussions on Facebook You are truly making a difference in this case and helping to get justice for Katelyn. Thank you so much for your support. For the last time on this podcast, until an update occurs, that is, I'm Jay Ryan. Take care of yourself.